And welcome back, Kevin's Corner time. Kevin Bowen, Chris Presley in studio, Tuesday around noonish. Thank you to everyone out there listening to this edition of Kevin's Corner and for all of your loyalty over the years. We'll continue to come at least once a week throughout the rest of the offseason. We had to go twice a week last week, man.
Sure did.
What did we get to? 24 hours? Did we even get 24?
Yeah, close to that.
Yeah.
I think just a hair under.
I was going to say 24-ish in, and then all of a sudden the Carson Wentz trade happened Thursday morning, I think late morning. So an emergency podcast just with my initial reactions with the Wentz trade, and now we'll get a little bit more into that. The pros and cons of Carson Wentz on today's podcast and this deal. And I think certainly from a Colts fan perspective, I feel like it's mostly positive. I don't know. Yeah, I'd say if I were to put a poll out there, I would say 70-ish%. I don't know. Like this trade. Nationally, I've seen both ends of the spectrum. Dan Orlovsky's ready to build the Carson Wentz statue out front. Mike Tannenbaum, Peter King, a little bit more pessimistic about it. So I think those are all very fair points on both sides of the ledger. It's a fascinating debate. I think that's something I found even going back and watching 2020 Carson Wentz. It's, boy, there's some stuff that makes you want to gouge your eyes out. Yep. There's some stuff that makes you want to say, whoa.
Yeah.
That guy was taken number 2 overall and did have an MVP caliber season in 2017. So I'm looking forward to the pod, man. Good amount of Twitter questions as well. And what are we? We're supposed to be the Combine, right now.
I know. It sucks. It really does.
I miss it so much for our city. And I'm probably a little bit different from a lot of my media colleagues, but I love the Combine. I think it's such a great one-stop shop. I think it's awesome for the city of Indianapolis. It's the one event every year in the same city for the NFL.
Right.
Major city, I should say. Mobile, Alabama, obviously not an NFL city. The draft, of course, going to different cities nowadays, and Super Bowl, of course. So I think it's a super informative event. You kind of meshing the best of the NFL world with GMs and coaches talking so much, and then getting a look at the future as well and the downtown buzz and all that. So you understand it, but unfortunately that is the case. Franchise tag can begin to be used today. Usually that stuff waits until the deadline of the tag, which I want to say is like March 9th or something. So still a little bit of time to go with that. And then free agency March 17th. So as we said, the kind of news this time of year, maybe there's a J.J. Watt signing that'll happen. Maybe some more cap casualties from veteran guys around the league. As you get into March, some re-signings from teams. But that's really it. Yeah. I don't expect anything major. Of course, every time I say that, the NFL says, hold my beer, Kevin.
Yeah.
But, we'll see how it plays out, man.
Yeah, just right off the bat, like you mentioned, the Colts fans mostly seeming positive and optimistic about the Carson Wentz news. For me, I think the 2 big reasons why. 1, you didn't give up what people thought we would have to give up. And 2, now we just have our quarterback at least solidified for the next year or 2, we would hope. So now we can focus on other things.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing was just the finality of it all seemed to excite fans. And I also think, as we talked about, Chris, in the weeks leading up to this news, it was the best opportunity to achieve a bit of a long-term vision, along with a higher ceiling, and not mortgage a crazy amount of the future. I remain team draft. I will stand by that as well. I'd rather have someone that doesn't have the scar tissue that Carson Wentz has. Now, is the scar tissue fixable, or is it, I don't know, is it a scab, or is it permanent? That's what we're going to find out here. But certainly, I totally get, and of the realistic options, it was Derek Carr for me, which I don't even know if that was realistic. It doesn't sound like it was. And number 2, it was Carson Wentz, and there was a gargantuan drop to Sam Darnold at 3. But that's kind of how I ranked them. So I am a fan of that for those reasons as well. We'll get into some of that here in the pros. And then some of the cons are just questions I think we have to ask, because there is a franchise out there that needs a quarterback that said no to their franchise quarterback, less than 20 months after making quite the financial commitment to him. So I guess that's the beauty and the beast of this thing, is it's not crystal clear, but at the same time, there are some definite reasons to say, whoa, Frank Reich can work some magic. You could pay some long-term dividends that I don't think anyone else out there, even draft-wise, you could argue, would achieve as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and, looking also in just the cap, stuff like that. just financially as well.
Yeah, it's not a giant commitment cap-wise. We said it last week, 2 years, $47 million is really what the guarantee is. We'll break a little bit of that down in today's podcast. But, yeah, I mean, it's certainly nothing like a Matthew Stafford cap hit or something along those lines of what you're looking like long-term as well. So let's hop into the pros, all right?
Okay.
I think two big pros stand out for me. We'll divide it up into a Frank Reich connection and then a ceiling trait connection. Let's start with Reich. I'll never forget Carson Wentz's first game back from the ACL was against the Colts, 2018, Week 3.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, a lot of Carson Wentz-centric questions towards Frank Reich because without Carson Wentz, Frank Reich would not have been the head coach of the Colts, and you can make the argument vice versa. Without Frank Reich, Carson Wentz maybe isn't the MVP of the league until he tears his ACL in 2017. But Frank uttered the phrase, one of my coaching highlights was coaching Carson Wentz. And I'm like, whoa, this dude is Peyton Manning and Larry Fitzgerald and Phillip Rivers and has been, in some rare company. And that's high praise, for a guy that is that young. So I think that kind of stood out to me. And I vaguely remember that in that September meeting between the Colts and the Eagles. But certainly, as I've looked more into this, it's come up again. Looking closer, Chris, at Philadelphia's decision to draft Carson Wentz, no one in that building believed more in Carson Wentz than Frank Reich. And just a refresher for everybody on that situation. Doug Peterson gets hired in 2016. He hires Frank Reich as his OC. The Eagles decide that they need to find the next face of the franchise at QB. But they're drafting 13 overall.
Mm-hmm.
So they go on a tour of the country to find that QB. Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, don't spit up your coffee, Paxton Lynch. Like, those were really the three names, I think, at the time in that 2016 draft class. And so from Mobile to, hotel rooms here in Indianapolis at the Combine, pro days in Berkeley and Fargo and Memphis and around, they decide that Carson Wentz is the guy. But more so than anyone else, Frank stood on the table for Carson Wentz. I think they all believed, but Frank Reich had this incredible conviction early on in Carson Wentz. So I think it goes back to the point I was making. I think I said this on the emergency podcast when I went on Philly radio and basically called Carson Wentz's son that Frank Reich never had. And that was, kind of a weird hyperbolic statement. I don't even know if that's a word that I made. I stand by it. I mean, Frank Reich has always believed in Carson Wentz. We're talking before he ever even put on a helmet. We're talking when the Eagles were sitting there at 13 overall, and it seemed like a long shot. And then, boom, they trade up to 8 with the Dolphins. And then kind of a fascinating story. The Titans are like, you don't have enough draft capital to get to 1. And Howie Roseman's telling John Robinson, just before you make a deal, let me know you're going to make a deal. And out of the blue, John Robinson trades with the Rams. Rams come screaming up. They're now at number 1 overall. Howie Roseman's freaking out. He hasn't called the Browns. The Browns, they don't believe, which just sums up the Browns, which, I guess you could argue how much Carson Wentz would help them, but he would help them to a degree. They don't believe in Carson Wentz because their analytics don't project FCS players very well. And that was when they had D Pedestra and whatever the hell that other guy's name is. Brown. I forget his first name. Anyways, Sashi Brown, I think. The Eagles are able to get up to number 2 overall. They get Carson Wentz, and the rest is history. If you watch, and I put a link to this in an article I wrote earlier on the week on the website, you watch the draft night call between the Eagles calling Carson Wentz. Man, when Frank Reich gets on the phone, that is a giddy, happy, joyous individual that, I felt like I was going to watch Tom Crean kiss his son after beating Temple in the second round of the tournament. One of the more terrific pictures that you'll ever see out there. But, Frank has just always had this connection with Carson Wentz. That night he said to him, it's your toughness, it's your competitiveness. He's called him fearless. He's called him a superstar. There's always so. I'm saying all this basically to reiterate the point. Frank Reich believes, and belief, conviction, any word you want to throw in there, it's unwavering. And yes, that was 4 years ago, but some of that is still alive. A lot of that is still alive, and that's why this trade has gone through. Obviously, you have the Press Taylor, Mike Groh connections as well on staff, which I think is critical. We shouldn't overlook that. They've been in Philly more recently than Frank, and if I'm Frank, I would have vetted the hell out of those two guys because you got to know what went wrong. Why? Like, I respect Doug Peterson, if I'm Frank Reich saying this. I respect Doug. What, Doug and Carson don't talk for multiple months, according to Adam Schefter?
Yeah, that's
what
absurd.
The hell is that?
Yeah.
So you got to vet those guys out and clearly find some sort of finality in what went wrong there. Morally, I don't know if anyone cares about this or not, but I think Carson Wentz and Frank Reich align a whole lot morally. Again, what does that do for you on Sundays? Who knows? What does that do for you in repairing confidence? I tend to think it can do a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you believe in someone and you align much more so than professionally, you probably are going to be, you know, more prone to gravitate towards them, believe in them, listen to them, hear them out. And I think lastly, Chris, that's the part of the Carson Wentz thing, is Carson trust Frank. If you read what's happened in Philly, it's not great for Carson Wentz. And you believe in it, I guess I should also add. And Carson has pretty much admitted I was not a perfect teammate by any means. I was stubborn and blah, blah, blah. Stubborn and not taking to coaching, okay. I don't love that, but you're not getting a new start. You can't be stubborn with Frank Reich, and you can't all of a sudden, you know, mistrust in him or all of a sudden you get to the line of scrimmage and you're doing something totally different than you talked about all week long.
Yeah.
And I just don't think Carson is that dumb. Or I just think he trusts Frank. I just think he flat out trusts Frank more than he trusts those coaches. And again, I do not agree with how Wentz possibly handled some of those situations, but now it's a new chapter. And I think his belief in Frank Reich will help mend that relationship, and I say mend the relationship of player-coach. And I think Carson, the valedictorian, the 4.0 student, he's smart. Very smart. Very football smart. Frank loves that. But I think Frank can match him. Football smarts for football smarts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's critical because I think Carson lost respect for maybe some of the people in the Eagles organization from a coaching standpoint. And again, as much as I disagree with some of that, now he's here with Frank Reich, and I think Frank can kind of go, you know, toe for toe with him in handling that. And I think the ego can be put to the side. So that's where I think the right connection is the biggest reason why this is a pro and the biggest reason why I have belief in this thing working out. I'm definitely not at the full-on belief of maybe some of the people that are, again, building statues for Carson Wentz and saying MVP and Super Bowl. We got a lot of questions and a lot of boxes to be checked before we go there. But I think 2018, 2019 is possible. And that would be a good step. Good step, for sure. Second, I guess let's go into the ceiling traits, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
There is a higher ceiling. We can make the argument about, like, okay, who's the QB you'd rather have for 2021, you know, and all that of, you know, I don't want to lose sight of what Rivers did last season. But there is no question to me that the raw traits you're getting at quarterback, there's more to work with than you had with Phillip Rivers. Think of the specific traits, Chris. It's the arm talent. It's the ability to move. You know, we talked about it on the emergency pod. Great seam throw of the football. Great driver down the field. The RPO element. You know, been hosting the morning show all week, and Big Joe goes, yeah, with Phillip Rivers, it wasn't an RPO. It was a PO.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not pissed off. I mean, that's
right.
Simply pass option. Wentz is going to give you some of that. Now, have the injuries maybe limited him as a big-time runner? Sure. I think that naturally happens. Andrew Luck, I don't think, ran that much as his career, especially when Frank Reich got here and whatnot. But there is just an arm talent and a body makeup to Carson Wentz that even when you watch a 2020 film, you're like, whoa, damn, that's eluding some pressure and making a ball fit into a window that I didn't think was possible, 1.3 seconds ago during that play. It goes back to a little bit of the video that I remember I'd compiled after Andrew Luck hung it up and saying, like, these are the Luck plays you'll miss the most. And this play is so vivid in my mind, that win and get in game in Tennessee week 17, 2018 season. You face a 3rd and goal inside the 10, I believe. I don't know. Maybe it's just outside the 10. It certainly wasn't within the 5. And the play happens. Luck takes a snap. And the first 2-3 seconds of the play, there's nothing there. And Luck just pirouettes out of the pocket, spins to his left. So now he's throwing across his body.
Yeah.
And there's Dontrell Inman on a scramble drill, back of the end zone, touchdown. You settle for 3 there with the stationary quarterback. You know me. I believe in game flow, man. And who knows? And it's just those sorts of plays. 3rd down in red zone last year. Those stats are eye-popping to
Right.
me. And how poor you were with Rivers. So that's where I get at a bigger ceiling. Sure, there are some things that Phillip Rivers did very, very well that I don't think Carson Wentz can do as well. The quick rhythm, the commitment to the quick rhythm, the commitment to the ball placement on the underneath routes. I mean, Rivers was incredible out that. Can you get Wentz there? You know, by all accounts and from watching the film, he really struggled with that. Really struggled with that last season as well. So I think those are the intriguing aspects, Chris, of this guy when he was the MVP of the league in 2017. He was the best passer in the league on 3rd down and red zone. I mean, you're talking a quarterback in his 2nd year in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Whew.
Right.
I mean, geez, you dream of that. Dream of that. So if he can sniff that at all here, now all of a sudden you're finishing off drives, keeping drives alive a little bit better. Or do you have the same, again, consistency throughout a game? Maybe not. But if you're punching in a few more, you're going to score more. Obviously, the red zone threat, his ability to run. He's a little slower in the 40 than Andrew. He's not Andrew Luck as a runner, but he's certainly much closer to Andrew Luck as a runner than he is to Carson Phillip Rivers as a runner. I don't know how much is that really saying anything, of course, but I just think there's a threat with his legs of when I compare the Rivers traits that are strengths to the Wentz traits that are strengths. The Rivers traits are more teachable than the Wentz traits. The Wentz traits are pretty innate. The arm talent, the ability to run, boy, that's really hard to teach that stuff. The Rivers traits, and not to discredit Phillip, but just the quick rhythm, the mastering of the system, knowing where to go with the football, things like that, to a degree you can teach that. Now, do you get to the level that Phillip had it? Probably not. But I think that's easier to try and mold into Carson than it is what Carson brings to the table. So those are the pros, man. The right connection there and different traits at quarterback, higher ceiling, more of a playbook. I think all that's very real. And I don't want to act like Carson Wentz is going to walk into a system he doesn't even know. I mean, Jim Irsay made it pretty clear that a big reason why he loved the Rivers signing was because during the pandemic, he knew the system.
Mm-hmm.
Carson's going to know it a good amount as well.
Right.
So I think that's something you have to take into account.
All right, here's with the bad. We got the good. What's the cons?
Anything else good-wise stand out to you or anything you disagree with, agree with on that?
I mean, you're pretty spot on. I don't think there's too much more I could add. Everything that I'm kind of thinking, it's me being more of a fan, trying to talk myself into, it's a change of scenery. It's a media city that's not as brash as Philly. It's he's a country guy. He likes to go hunting and fishing, and we have plenty of that here. I don't know. It's just little things like that where he is, I feel like, starting anew. And we can just see how it plays out. I'm
glad you brought up the environment. I don't think that's something we should overlook. And part of that might be a little bit, I don't know, overblown, but I do think it's real. The North Dakota kid to Philadelphia is a little bit different than the North Dakota kid to Indianapolis. Now, I'll throw in with that, by all accounts, Carson Wentz more or less demanded a trade, more or less wanted out of Philadelphia. So you wanted to be here. Act like it. And I know I drove that point home on the emergency podcast, but you've gotten a second life with the guy that, helped you play at the highest level of your career. There's a lot of quarterbacks around the league that would dream for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you need to take advantage of that. Be grateful for it. If you were humbled by Philadelphia, admit it. And walk into this locker room from day one and be the leader that position needs to be in, by the early accounts from reaching out to players, both sides of the ball. He seems to be doing a great job of that.
Yep.
But a lot more of that will come when adversity hits, and that's impossible to script in the spring. All right, questions. Cons/questions. I don't want to sound like it's all just like 100% a negative, but if you don't have questions about this move, then you're related to the Wentz family or the Irsay family. Like, you got to have questions about this. First, broken on the field. And again, I say that with a question mark because the quarterback I watched last year, majority-wise, that was a broken QB. There is scar tissue on him, Chris. I tend to think the scar tissue is more mental than physical. But let's start with physical. When you talk to people from Philadelphia, they believe the injuries have impacted him a lot more than maybe just the raw numbers look like in terms of games missed. Obviously, the ACL speaks for itself, but they're saying more the back injury, more the concussion that took him out of the playoff loss to Seattle, that there is just a little bit more hesitancy, not as much throwing with anticipation, and just a general lack of confidence, maybe in his skill set. And again, how much of that is injury related? How much of that was playing behind an offensive line that I do think his offensive line is just getting ripped to shreds. Like, Philly had a good offensive line for several years he was there. Now, last year, an abomination of a group. But let's not act like the Philly offensive line was a bunch of jokes from 2016 through 2019. But I guess how much of that has now created not the same gunslinger mentality that really a lot of rookies come into the league with.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew played the game totally different early on in his career than he played it in 2018. So I'm curious about that. No one has fumbled more than him since he entered the NFL. The 50 sacks in, 12 or 13 games last year, it's largely on the O-line, but it's some of that on him of holding on to it because he's maybe not throwing with the anticipation that he did early in his career. Just to note, the injuries it was a rib fracture his rookie season, a torn ACL in 2017, the fractured vertebrae in 2018, the concussion in 2019, and that's it, I guess. Some might say that's it. That's a lot. Again, it's not like, it's not like Paris Campbell injuries, but you certainly have to note them.
Yeah.
I would say another con or question I have, Chris, about broken on the field is, should we be worried that really only one team put up a real offer for him?
Right.
If you get outside of the top 5 of the draft, Carolina, Chicago, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, New Orleans, I know I'm missing some teams, the Patriots.
Right.
There's a lot of teams that seem to be interested in quarterbacks or at least don't have their quarterback answer. Does that scare any people away? Or did Wentz's representation just simply say to teams, hey, Carson wants to go to Indy? Sorry. Who knows? But obviously there wasn't that much interest in him from here's an offer, here's a legit offer, those sorts of things. Does that scare anybody at all? So that, to me, again, on the field, I just see a little bit of a breakdown in mechanics, really from the lower body, which is something that obviously the Colts need to fix and can fix. But you worry, too, just about as the injuries have piled up, after the sacks from last season, how different is that quarterback from the quarterback Frank Reich left in December of 2017 when he tore his ACL in Los Angeles? I think those are the questions that you have. And then secondly, the con question is just leadership. I don't know if you've read the Philly Voice story, but it was a pretty damning story pretty much about Wentz after the 2019 season that had a lot of anonymous players inside of that locker room that basically said he was not a great teammate or didn't possess the leadership traits that we need at quarterback, this and that. Wentz addressed the article. He certainly did not totally diminish all of those statements. He acknowledged he was not at the level of a teammate that he needed to be, and I think that comes from the stubbornness a little bit with him. He's very public with that he is a type A personality, which is fine, but inside of a 53-man locker room, you've got to be willing to, I think, just be more open in general to catering to multiple personalities, both sides of the ball, And what happens when adversity hits? Are you crumbling and not talking to your head coach for 2 months? Or are you going to be the bigger man in that situation and realize that more responsibility comes with you because you do make the amount of money that you make and you do touch the football in every play and those sorts of things? And that gets back to the humbling aspect to it. I think the most just like, whoa aspect to all of this is the fact that Carson Wentz is no longer the Eagles' franchise quarterback 20 months after he signed a $128 million deal.
Yep.
Teams, teams are praying the rosary every night for a quarterback. And you financially commit to him in a magnitude contract. And yet less than 2 years later, he's gone. And he's gone for a package that a lot of Eagles fans wish was a little bit richer.
Mm-hmm.
The Jalen Hurts draft pick to me, Chris, really head-scratching. Again, you talk to Eagles people, and they're just adamant, like, literally that organization thinks that much of backup quarterbacks. I'm like, what? What? Like, they had that 2019 draft or 2020 draft. I guess to set the picture. 2019, Wentz leads the Eagles, 4 straight wins in the month of December. They're in the playoffs. That's the best Carson Wentz and that team has looked since the ACL leading to the Super Bowl run. Like, holy shit, that's great. Now, Jadeveon Clowney knocks them out of that playoff game against Seattle in the first round. They lose. So they come back to the draft in April. And despite having 2 draft picks in the first 100 and needs all over the roster, some of the cap hits starting to come up as we see right now, the cap situation they're in, and they draft Jalen Hurts in the second round to be the backup.
Right.
Like, whoa. I mean, if that dude is really your franchise quarterback and you really believe in him, why are you doing that? And again, this is before the 2020 season happens, when Wentz completes 57% of his passes, when he's benched for Jalen Hurts late in the season, when you have the Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz disconnect. So before all that, you already made a move that speaks a lot more than any he said, she said comments in a Philly Voice article or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, you really need to back up that much? And then obviously you hear the Carson Wentz that he was not happy about the Jalen Hurts thing. And, 2 sides of the coin there. Some people would say, dude, man up and act like Tom Brady acted when they drafted Jimmy G and whatnot. And then other people will be like, I mean, how could you not be worried about the franchise clearly making some sort of move to a quarterback that skill set wise is a little bit different as well? I mean, Hurts isn't crazy dual threat, but does bring a little bit more of that, even though Wentz is a runner. So that's, I guess, just where I have some of the leadership questions about why did that franchise say no? And I know it's very complicated, and we'll never get the answer on it fully, but he was made available for a reason. And Chris Ballard, said as much a few weeks ago when he was on with Dan about, guys are available this time of year for a reason. And who knows? Maybe Philly can sit here and say, hey, we've got Jalen Hurts. We've got the 6th or 7th overall pick, wherever they're drafting. We feel good that we're going to go in a different direction right now. But it clearly wasn't just a Doug Peterson thing.
Yeah, right.
And that, I think, is what you get into, too. Frank Reich's relationship with Doug Peterson, his relationship with Nick Sirianni. Like, what happens if Sirianni comes in that building and says to Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie, guys, I just came from Indy. Frank Reich won't stop talking about Carson Wentz. We can fix him. Let's keep him. Would that have changed their minds? Would that have changed Wentz's mind? Like, who knows? And then obviously Peterson. Clearly, Carson Wentz's lack of further development ultimately cost Doug Peterson his job. Yeah, to be a fly on the wall between those conversations between him and Frank Reich.
Right.
About all of this. So that's where you have some of these questions, and they will get answered. They won't be answered at all for several months. But Carson Wentz has a lot of proving. It was kind of funny, that Michael Pittman quote yesterday, which, a lot of it was great. And you could, listening to Michael, you can hear the eagerness in his voice about playing with Carson Wentz. And, he definitely mentioned the whole big arm and everything. And I'm pulling up this quote right now. There was one aspect to it where he's like, he's got to prove to us or he's got to show to us something along those lines. And as much as some people might say, wow, a second-year wideout who caught 50 balls is saying that, he's right. Here's a quote. Pittman on Wentz. I don't know anything about him. I know. I think he's a stand-up guy. I don't know anything about him, but I don't want to judge him before I even meet him. He's going to have to show me who he is. I think he's going to be a great guy. I expect that from him. He is. He's going to have to show the Colts. And that's fine. And that's no ripping by Michael Pittman or anything like that. Sure, do a lot of second-year wideouts, would they maybe hide away from saying something like that? Sure. But I have no problem with it. He's right. Carson Wentz has got to show that locker room that he is different because they all have heard the whispers. They've got friends that play for the Eagles. And some Eagles players say some of that is not true. Fletcher Cox, I know, has been pretty outspoken in saying that is not true. But those are all elements to Carson Wentz's time here in Indy that he will have to prove.
Absolutely.
Anything else, man, before we get into Twitter questions?
No, that was great. Good breakdown. So from cons and questions that you have, let's go into questions that our listeners have.
Let's do it.
All right, this first one's from Steven. What position are the Colts addressing at 21? Not the best player available, but the best player available for our top needs, including tackle, corner, and edge.
Well, I'd go left tackle, Chris, and then I'd go edge. Probably go corner wide out would be pretty close after that. I think I do believe there are some stopgap options in free agency at left tackle. I do think we're talking about long-term / could potentially help you from day one. I think left tackle in the draft is probably the route that makes the most sense to me. Edgewise, it's flavor of the month in free agency. I think there's good depth there. J.J. Watt would be on one end of it, a little bit older, but he can check some boxes. And then guys like Carl Lawson and Romeo Cora, and I know people have mentioned Yannick Ngakoue. I'm not as much there. I don't think the Colts maybe are as much there. Could be wrong about that. But yeah, I go left tackle.
All right, this one's from Jason. How much impact, good or bad, do you think Carson Wentz acquisition has on free agents, looking at the Colts?
Well, I think it's better than the alternative, a week ago, but I don't think it's anything overbearing. Obviously, the name I come back to is T.Y. And how much does this move help his desire to come back here? Right. The Colts' desire and believing T.Y. can be a good fit. I do think when you look at T.Y. specifically, we might have a question, I think, on T.Y. So maybe I'll hold off a little bit on that. But, yeah, I think it'll help you. But, I don't think it's Andrew Luck type of recruiting chip.
Right.
Like you used to have.
Will says, all right, quarterback is done. Got to go free agent edge next, right? Draft a left tackle. Splash on Bud Dupree possibly. Also, do you believe due to the uncertainty with the cap, the likelihood for more free agents signing one-year deals will increase? Believe that we could really play into the Colts' favor for us to extend the names like Quentin Nelson, Darius Leonard, Braden Smith, etc. next offseason. Lastly, go get Allen Robinson.
I wouldn't mind that,
Not at all.
Will, it's a good point. I get the thought on the one-year deals. I don't think that's definitely going to happen, but you can also backload some of those 2 or 3 year contracts.
Mm-hmm.
The Colts have 40-some million. I don't know the number off the top of my head. 43 is kind of popping into my head, but that should be room for 2 to 3 big guys. But yeah, I would say more so it's just the backloading of those contracts. And Nelson, Leonard, Smith, really, Nelson, I don't see him getting an extension this offseason. You can pick up the 5th-year option on him for 2022. Leonard and Smith would be the two. And I don't have too much of an issue on the Colts' ability to manipulate the cap how they need to. It's more of just what we've seen in years past. The Colts just like to have a lot of rollover cap. So while they might have 40-some million, they typically like to keep a decent amount of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something to keep an eye on, too, as some deals start to happen.
No one's asked us. This is a question from me. With those guys' contracts coming up, you think anyone gets tagged in that year?
It's a good question. The tag can start today, like we mentioned earlier. I think extend to March 9th. The only name that I keep on coming back to is Xavier Rhodes. But, is it going to be another prove-it-year for him? Now, a prove-it-year for him on a much healthier contract than he made last season.
Yeah.
that would make some sense to me. It's a big number, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say corner's like $15 million on the tag there, so that's certainly a big commitment. Part of me says no, when we haven't seen the franchise use it since McAfee in I think 2014. But he is the one name, Chris.
Okay.
And honestly, of all the past years, he's probably the name that's like most likely. Like the Colts have never even had really anybody that you would even think about tagging. But I say no.
All right, this one's from Tyler. Who do you see the Colts bring in weapon-wise for Carson Wentz? Zach Ertz is still an option, or does this increase chances like for Trey Burton to be re-signed? Love the pod, and thanks.
Thank you, Tyler. I mean, you would think it increases for both guys. Now, personally, I'd like to see them get a little younger at tight end.
Right.
I think Ertz and Burton are both kind of similar ages. But, yeah, you can't argue with what the past success has been with both of those guys. And, of course, Frank Reich as well. I still think a little bit younger. And I don't know. I feel like Jack Doyle's got something left. The Buffalo game, maybe that's too much on my mind, but he's one of your better players in that Bills game. So a Doyle, a Mo Alley Cox, and a fourth-round pick at tight end. Now I think about it, I guess you don't have a third-round pick, so where you're committing your draft capital comes a little bit more pressing. But yeah, both of those guys make sense for me, Tyler.
We're going to stick with the weapons with a question from Niles, who says, now that we have Carson Wentz, I think it's more important to go get a playmaking tight end over the one big-name free agent. Do you agree?
That's interesting.
One big-name wide receiver free agent, I should clarify.
Yes, maybe. I still look at wideout and think it's a bit of a need. So now a playmaking tight end, really, Chris, it's like, Hunter Henry, and then it's just kind of, Jonnu Smith, and I don't have the tight end list in front of me, but it's not a lot of, there's certainly a lot of more top-end wideouts than there are top-end tight ends. I get what Niles is saying, though. You probably feel a little bit better about some of the names at receiver than you do about some of the higher ceiling tight ends you have. Hell, what about Kyle Pitts at number 21?
Love him.
Yeah?
Love it.
Now, is that too luxury? Is that too video gamey?
I'm not if we talk about hitting on first-round draft picks, you're going to draft a tight end. That dude better be good. Real good.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But his size and everything, I would think, translates to the NFL. The numbers he put up at Florida. Yeah,
you got to put real good in all caps. Eric Ebron, 10 overall? Wherever he went with the Lions. Vernon Davis, 6 overall, I think. Yeah, you don't see tight ends taken that high. But it's a good question, Niles.
All right, Colton's question was answered by a lot of social media yesterday, and obviously we touched on it a little bit earlier, but do you think Michael Pittman and Carson Wentz will change numbers?
I'll tell you what, Chris, I didn't realize that many people cared this much about it. Now, if you are financially invested in a Michael Pittman jersey, I get it. I guess if you want to buy a Carson Wentz jersey, I get it as well. But number aesthetics, that is a big deal to a lot of people. This question, Colton, along with 7 other people, asked this question. I believe Michael Pittman, I didn't really mention this much in the article I wrote, but it seems like they mutually agreed that Michael Pittman's going to keep number 11. For what it's worth, Wentz was kind of like handed 11 at North Dakota State. I don't think it was ever like his, I'm wearing 11 for my father or grandfather or something like that. Obviously his Instagram involves CJ something 11 and whatnot, but yeah, man, I don't. You got a number for Carson Wentz?
No, I said 12. I said go ahead and give him 12.
Oh boy, you're gonna do that to DeMichael Harris?
I know. That's what I started thinking about. I started wondering. I know I was listening to McAfee a little bit yesterday. He said, "Give him 1. I don't care." Said I like when people wear number 1. Go ahead.
Yeah. I guess we'll see what happens there. Yeah, the 12 thing. I have no issue with Carson Wentz wearing 12 for what it's worth. I don't think that is a jersey that needs to be retired at all. Yeah. QB numbers. I think Pittman looks good in 11.
Yeah.
Looks quicker. 86, he looked like he was playing JV. There's the tall kid on JV that, we throw the ball to once every 3 quarters.
Yeah, that's definitely the trend. You look at Godwin, you look at every receiver on Kansas City. They're all, I get lost on the Kansas City games. I'm like, was that Mike? Nope, that wasn't him.
Marcus Robinson?
Right.
Was that Hardman?
Pringle? Who was that?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Nathaniel and Connor both have similar questions, so we put them together. Now that we know who our starting quarterback is, just wondering who our backup could be. Would we bring back Jacoby? Is it going to be Jacob Eason or another veteran like Alex Smith? Is there another quarterback that you have in mind? I know it's not that important. Just thought that I would ask.
Well, first, I think when you look at Wentz, he's got to get over his little afraid of the backup thing. And I know Jalen Hurts in the second round was whatever, but he can't be worried about the guy behind him. If he's worried about the guy behind him, then he's not a franchise quarterback. And that's point blank for me. So you got to get over that. If you take Jacoby Brissett at his word, Chris, I mean, he is uber confident in his ability to still be a starting quarterback in this league. That's not happening here. So he's got to go elsewhere, right? Part of me thinks, what about Jacoby to the Eagles?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I was thinking New England, but, I mean, why not?
New England probably offers him a better chance at open competition, but I don't know if can you go to Philly? Who knows what Nick Sirianni really thinks about him with some true serum and whatnot. Vet names out there. Shit, Hoyer's out there. I was reminded that saying the word SHIT, a great friend of my brother, Sam Story, said that he was in the dentist chair the other day, and the lady asked him, the hygienist asked him, we've got a Bluetooth speaker. He didn't want to watch Judge Judy. Bluetooth speaker, would you like it to be turned to anything? And, he said, connected to my phone. We're going to listen to the Kevin's Corner emergency podcast.
Wow.
And so, talk about loyalty, passion, love them. And I said that word, and the hygienist goes, can he say that on air? I'm like, oh, gosh, I didn't know we'd be being played in, dental offices. I thought B105.7 was in every dental office across the United States. So sorry about that, Sam. Thank you for the loyalty there. All right, vet backup names, C.J. Beathard, Blaine Gabbert, Mike Glennon, Nate Sudfeld.
There you go.
That's a right connection. That's an Eagle connection.
Right. Carson and Nate, come on back.
Geno Smith. I mean, these dudes were backups in the NFL. I know they all make you want to, again, drive off a cliff, but do you want to spend a good amount of money or not? I think that's something you have to say as well. Now, of course, everyone will say, what about Eason? He'd be my backup, but I'm just trying to put on the Colts glasses here, and I could very well see the Colts not wanting to go that route. You know me, I was good with Eason coming in and playing last year if Phillip got hurt. So, I'm good with him being the backup. I'm ready to start the next chapter if Wentz, blanks the bed. But when you got the seat a little bit warmer, those guys in West 56 probably want a backup that's at least put on a jersey in an NFL game.
Right, yeah.
So that's where I throw some of those names out there. And I just think there's names that we got to think about.
This one's from Jake, purely based on Carson Wentz being the new quarterback. Over under 2.5 primetime games next season.
Oh, God, I'd be shocked if that was over. I mean, shit. With luck, you could barely I don't think you had a single one. And remember, when the schedule came out in 2016, 2017, 2018, you thought Luck was a quarterback. Hell, 2019, you thought he was a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't even get one with Luck, what makes you think you're going to get three with Carson Wentz? I guess if you're looking for the Plains, the Plains states to all tune into Monday Night Football, maybe you'll get that. Maybe there's an Eagles audience that'll still watch. It's obviously a huge market.
Just give me one at home.
Great point. I'll say two, but I mean I feel like I'm too high there.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you got the NFC West. Those are some attractive teams. So let's go with two. I don't know. Is Jacksonville a primetime team now? I mean, Trevor Urban. That's a decent little duo.
Yeah, especially early on. They'll be like one of the first Thursday night games.
And they'll definitely be a Monday nighter in the first 2 months.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, Kevin, this one's from Ron. How much of us already having a solidified right tackle and Braden Smith played a part in us getting Carson Wentz? Can't help but to think a great part of the Colts taking a chance on Wentz is because we have Smith.
Yeah, Ron, I'll be honest. I don't think it had any bearing. I don't. Yeah, I hate to rip the question, but I'm sorry if you don't have a quarterback. That's why you needed to go get Carson Wentz. I don't think Braden Smith's presence is wonderful for this football team, but solidified right tackle, I guess maybe you're okay to give up more draft capital. But yeah, I don't think it had any bearing. I mean, flat out, you just needed a quarterback.
Here's a great name for you, Johnny Lightning.
Oh, I like it. Johnny Lightning Witchker. I love it.
Asks, shouldn't re-signing Xavier Rhodes be one of the most obvious moves that you need to make this offseason if you're Chris Ballard and the Colts? Considering the way he played for the Colts last year, the amount of money you have to spend this offseason, and question marks like Rock and Marvell Tell, is offering a guy like Rhodes $10 to $12 million a year crazy?
Mr. Lightning, it's the obvious part that I pause at. I think he matters a whole lot, and I thought Xavier Rhodes was tremendous for this football team last year, and I don't want to overlook that. But, Chris, we talked about it a few podcasts ago. Why did Xavier Rhodes have success here last year? Familiar face in Jonathan Gannon. Well, Jonathan Gannon's no longer here. Okay, point number 2. He was motivated, Xavier Rhodes. Just got cut by the Vikings, and now he's playing on a prove-it contract year.
Mm-hmm.
Is he still going to be that motivated on a 2 or 3 year deal worth $30-some million? And then lastly, he was affordable. I don't think you can overlook that. He's not going to be as affordable this year. So you've got to factor in all that. And then you're committing 2 to 3 years potentially at that price versus just a 1 year deal to that level. Now, having said all that, when you list guys like Rock and Marvell Tell and those situations, you don't feel great about your cornerback depth. At least I don't. They think better of it than I do. And, you look at the schedule and you see some of the wide receivers on that schedule next year, and those dudes can catch footballs.
Yeah.
And can do it at a high level. So I definitely hear you. Lightning, free agent class isn't great, but just a multi-year commitment, man. I pause a little bit at that.
All right, Craig says, I think the Carson Wentz trade was an absolute steal for the Colts. We get a young, most importantly, mobile quarterback who has the arm to throw downfield for a third and likely a first, which is really worth a second since it's a 2022 pick. He reminds me of what everyone was saying about Phillip Rivers before we got him. He turned the ball over too much. However, Rivers had a crappy O-line just like Wentz. According to Pro Football Focus, Wentz's rating is 90 without pressure and 55 with pressure, and the Eagles gave 65 sacks in 2020 compared to 19 with an immobile Rivers and the Colts. I expect Wentz will win Comeback Player of the Year and lead the Colts to an AFC championship. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Oh, boy. Craig, that is a lot there. Head to Vegas, Craig. That'd be my first comments. You can get great odds right now, I think, I don't know about Comeback Player of the Year, but certainly Colts to win the AFC championship, you could get some pretty good odds there. He lays out points that you certainly have to acknowledge here.
Mm-hmm.
I also think we need to just keep in mind sacks can also be a quarterback stat.
Yes.
And if you look at, I wrote an article last week, and I mentioned on the Emergency Pod, the numbers from the numbers of Wentz with Reich versus without. To me, a surprising aspect, I thought they were pretty similar, and that was surprising. It was surprising to me, Chris, how the time to throw was pretty similar for Wentz with Reich versus without Reich. And we also should mention, Frank Reich has never called the plays for Carson Wentz. Now, I assume that'll go well, but that's just a whole another element to this of again, I think it'll go well. Of course, the devil's advocate could say, what happens when Carson Wentz doesn't feel like the play calling's going well, and now are those two, bucking heads a little bit more? How much of a good cop did Frank Reich play for Carson Wentz because he wasn't the play caller? Was he of any good cop?
Yeah.
I think that's something to ask as well. As far as the AFC Championship, all that, yeah, Craig, I can't go there. Carson Wentz has played, I think it's 9 snaps in the playoffs in his career, and that might be my biggest long-term team picture worry, Chris, is this guy has not played in many big-time playoff-like atmospheres. Whatever, college, he's in the national title. That's great. That's fine. I don't think we're comparing an FCS national title game to an NFL playoff game. And I just think that's the reality of it. When you look at him versus the other AFC quarterbacks, he doesn't have that playoff experience, and you have to sit here and acknowledge that. Look at the final 4 guys last year. They're all younger than Carson, and they all have won games in the playoffs. A lot of them won multiple games in the playoffs, whether you're talking Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson and even Baker Mayfield as well. Tannehill, a little bit older, but he's obviously won a couple playoff games. So that's, I think, a part of the Carson Wentz thing that we're probably not talking about yet because, like, he's got to fix himself before we even get to, like, what are you doing in the postseason? But then once you get to January, there's going to be another elephant in the room of this is a guy that is now, this will be his 6th NFL season. And again, he's played 2 series in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Has he been a big part of getting Philadelphia to playoffs and to that number 1 overall seed in 2017? Definitely. But he hasn't been there. And that's just different. I mean, that's different ball. That is a different ball game. You guys have heard me talk about it endlessly. It takes Peyton 6 years to win a playoff game. Andrew Luck, it was those progressions of you lose in the wild card round, and then you win the next year in the wild card round, and then you get to the AFC title game. I think it's kind of a build oftentimes with guys in the playoffs. And obviously the last quarterback that just exited here in Phillip Rivers, that was kind of always the hanging cloud over his career. So I think that is a part of Wentz that we just don't know yet. And that's where the Orlovsky comments about MVP and Super Bowl, I'm like, whoa, geez, yeah. Did Mahomes' right arm fall off in the last 48 hours? I saw that they had a baby. I forget the baby's name, but I don't know. I don't.
Dan was at Disney. He was in a good place.
Was he at Disney?
Yeah.
And I love Dan Orlovsky. I think his insight is terrific. I'm just like, whoa, that's aggressive. Mm-hmm. Did you see Mike Tannenbaum's comments?
I did not.
Oh my God. So this dude, and this is the jackass that had the Marlon Mack comments.
Right.
Remember that? I mean, come on. How bad is that? Okay, so he throws out the old says in the AFC South, I've got Carson Wentz as the 4th best quarterback, but I believe he's better than Andrew Luck. I'm just like, whoa. I'm like, wait a minute. Time out. I'm like, how do those even add up?
Yeah.
Those don't make any sort of sense to me whatsoever. Now, to Tannenbaum's AFC South point, I mean, hell, Wentz, I guess, is probably the 3rd best AFC South quarterback. Obviously, Watson is better than him. I would think Ryan Tannehill deserves to be better than him right now. And then I can't put Trevor Lawrence above him just yet. So I guess the AFC South comment, while it was eye-popping, it wasn't like that jarring to me. It was he's 4th in the AFC South, yet he's better than Luck.
Right.
I'm like, Jesus, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the offseason.
All right, this one's from Alec. What would you say the percentage is that Ballard trades back in the first round after losing a 3rd-rounder this year? Or do you think he will go with the quality over quantity in the draft? Yeah, you guys will hear me say this over the next 2 months. It's impossible to say until the board starts falling. I'll put it at 50-50. Certainly reasons why Alec puts it out there. You trade back, 8-ish spots, you probably get a 3rd-rounder. But I think it is to the point where it is quality over quantity. But, if your offensive tackle board looks different than how it's fallen, and you like the kid from Virginia Tech, and he's still on the board, and whatever, the Notre Dame game, the Notre Dame guy, Eichenberg, is still on the board, and, you think there's a chance that both of them will be there at 28 or 30, something like that, maybe you do move on back. So, but, yeah, I think it's quality over quantity. Sammy wants to address the left tackle and defensive end situation with the Colts right now, again, in terms of who we go after in the first round. He says, I think left tackle and then get a free agent defensive end. What are your thoughts? I feel a little bit better about the free agent edge guys. And, I feel intrigued by J.J. Watt, Chris. It's, I mentioned this on the radio this week. It reminds me of the Justin Houston situation a couple years ago. Houston gets cut by Kansas City. He had missed 20-some games in his previous 4 years. He couldn't stay healthy and just, therefore, couldn't produce at a consistent level. He comes here, and from day one, the Colts are like, watch. Under our strength program, Rusty Jones, we'll get Justin Houston back to being healthy. We'll scale back his play time a little bit. He won't be dropping into coverage, and we'll get him to be available. And therefore, if he's available, he'll produce. That's right. I mean, he played every single game the last 2 seasons. Now, where I think Watt separates himself with Houston can play 16 games in a season. And, Chris, there's 4 or 5 where I'm like, wait, Justin Houston played? Yeah. I don't remember seeing him on the field. J.J. Watt plays 16 games in a season. You're going to feel him every single Sunday. You might feel him more on other Sundays, but you'll feel him
every single Sunday. That's the difference. Now, can Watt stay healthy? Do the Colts look at his situation similar to how they looked at Houston? Do they say, you come here, and we know you've missed a lot of time over the last 5 years. Think of the last 5 years, his games played have gone 3 games, 5 games, played all 16 3 years ago, played 8 2 years ago, and then played all 16 this year. He played the most snaps of any defensive lineman in the league this past year, and it wasn't even close to who was second. Now, he also was double-teamed more than anybody else.
Right.
Well, dude, you got DeForest Buck. I don't care who's wearing 99. They both can wear 99 for all I care. You won't be getting as many double teams as you got in Houston, when it was you and me on that D-line down there. So it's a big if, but if you believe in your strength program like that and you think Watt can stay healthy for 2 years and it's super incentive-laden, boom. Do it. I would do it. I would take J.J. Watt 10 times out of 10 over Justin Houston. But, man, you got to be sure about that health.
Yep, absolutely. This one comes from Blind Penguin. In regards to the conditional first-round pick, are there rules? Can the Colts sit Carson Wentz in games, quote, without injury or bad play, end quote, to avoid him reaching 70 to 75% snap count? And if there are no rules and the Colts value the first-round pick, do you see this as a backdoor opportunity for Jacob Eason to get some regular season reps? Keep up the great work.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't believe there are rules, Chris. Can't you finagle your way into it? Oh, yeah, Carson, just shoulders a little bit. Yeah, we're up 21. Mm-hmm. Jacob, send in the game. Having said that, I'd be stunned if the Colts benched him or sat him unless they are burnt toast. Burnt toast. Like, not even – the Colts aren't going to flirt with – like, they are committed to Carson Wentz. Mm-hmm. Now, remember, 7 teams make the playoffs, Chris. That keeps a whole lot of teams in the playoffs race.
Right.
So this is not like you get to the start of December, and just because you're, 5-7, 11-5 as a 7 seed this year was an anomaly. I'd be stunned if that's the case moving forward. But we're talking about a Colts franchise that dressed Brian Hoyer in a game when the season was over. Now, Brian Hoyer didn't matter for a first-round pick, but I'm just saying – well, I think there's a decision to make. I don't think they believe there's a decision to make. And who knows? Maybe the first-round pick element is different. But I'll go back to what I said earlier on the emergency pod. He really has to get hurt for him not to achieve this. I mean, Rivers played 95% of the snaps. There were some games where Jacoby finished those games, and Jacoby played in the short yardage package. Carson Wentz is like one of the best QB sneakers Frank Reich's ever been around. So I don't think we have to worry about old Jacoby packages with whoever is the backup. So I get it. I understand the question. But unless Carson Wentz misses multiple games due to injury, I have resigned to the fact that Colts are giving up their first-round pick.
All right, this, and pardon if I mispronounce this, DLG is a longtime listener to Kevin's Corner and other platforms that you do things as well. First time sending in a question and actually downloaded Twitter just to ask you this question.
Wow. Thank you, DLG. Appreciate that. That's man, that's awesome.
Pardon me. First one being, it's been suggested that Carson Wentz has leadership issues. In your opinion, does that make it more vital that either T.Y. Hilton, Jack Doyle, or both are brought back this offseason? Keep that veteran leadership on the offense, 2 guys that have spent their entire career here, or Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson are enough. Thanks in advance, and keep up the great work.
Well, and then secondly, welcome to hell, because that is Twitter. No, I'm just kidding. I think Twitter's awesome. I actually love it. And thank you again for sending the question. Jack Doyle is under contract. Let's start there. He's not going anywhere unless I'm missing something. Let me start here before we get into the debate, because I do think it's a fine question. Carson Wentz needs to be a leader. Like, point blank, period. There are other guys that he mentions and other guys inside that locker room that have leadership roles already, but that quarterback is a leader. He speaks in that huddle every single play. He needs to be there. So Carson's got to get there. Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, I don't know how much vocally. Hilton, it's probably more of leadership-wise. There's not a lot of vocal leaders, I think, on that offense. Kelly probably more so than some of the other ones. I tend to look at that defense. I think Buckner and Leonard and Kenny Moore to a degree as well. has a little bit more leaders. But let me reiterate, Carson's got to look in the mirror. He's got to accept coaching. He's got to realize it's a fresh start. You can be smart. You be the valedictorian. Do all that. But you can't be stubborn to the point where you ignore, alienate yourself, all those things.
This question comes from Tanner, wants to know your thoughts about potentially Joe Haeg and Carson Wentz reuniting since they were teammates at North Dakota State.
Yeah,
also
I get
thinks
it.
It helps the depth.
They're good friends. I know that. Joe Haeg, not a lot of left tackle experience. Like, is it an open competition? I like Joe Haeg as a depth, but part of me thinks, he could compete for a right guard opening or a right tackle opening, something like that.
Chakota wants to ask, can you explain the cap and Carson Wentz contract for this year and next upcoming years? Was kind of confused on why or how the Eagles took the $30 million dead cap.
How about that being the biggest cap hit in NFL history?
Yeah.
Another reason that I'm just like,
that front office, man.
Whoa, what happened? Okay, so Wentz's cap hit for this year, I think, is $25 million. And then $15 million for 2022 becomes guaranteed once a new league year starts next month. Mm-hmm. So he'll be on the books for $15 million. But there's no more guaranteed past this year. Now, if you want to keep him, because he's under contract through 2024, I think it's right around $25 million again. But again, there's nothing that is guaranteed for right here, right now, past 2022. So yeah, it's $25 million this year. Again, the $15 million for 2022 becomes guaranteed next month, and then the remaining, what is that? 22 plus 25 plus 15 is 40. So you got 7 more left. That becomes guaranteed the new league year, 2022.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Yep.
But yeah, it's essentially 2-year, $47 million, and the opportunity to and like look at quarterbacks making that money. I mean, that's that's for the most part, it's about middle of the pack money.
Yes.
So that's what, to your point earlier about the financial commitment.
Yeah, I was looking like Jimmy G's making that.
Yeah. So. It's not earth shattering.
All right, Creighton says, I can't help but to think back if the Colts would have picked up the 5th-year option on Malik Hooker. Have to feel like he would have been added to a trade, at least to get a pick up, or at least to get us another pick, if not to help us get one. Major mistake, in my opinion, by Chris Ballard.
No, Creighton, I'm not ripping Chris for that. I was pretty outspoken about I would have picked up the 5th-year option for Malik, and then Julian Blackmon said, watch me play football, and you'll disagree with that statement, and I certainly did, so I will fully admit that I was wrong about that. But, like, what draft pick are you getting from Malik Hooker off a torn Achilles? I mean, I just can't imagine you're going to get anything of substance there. And I don't even know how the contract would have worked, about what sort of guarantee you would be on the books for, or a cap hit there. That's something I haven't even. It's crazy. We literally haven't talked about Malik Hooker once.
Right.
We're talking to Frank Reich Thursday. The combine's supposed to be this week. We're going to talk to Frank. Oh, shit, I guess I shouldn't have asked him about Malik Hooker just to get it on record.
Did you see Chad Johnson tweet at Malik Hooker?
No, did he? Actually, I saw Malik respond, but I have no idea what the context was.
It's just very odd. So every now and then Chad Johnson will challenge cornerbacks or secondary.
Yeah.
Just to show that he still has it. And
right.
he was like, hey, I want some of you, Malik Hooker. And I'm like, why would you challenge Malik? Like, that's – I don't necessarily think that he's, a great one-on-one outside the corner.
I don't – nor do I understand what is the beef there.
Right.
That as well. That's great.
This is from Chase. Obviously, Carson Wentz has a higher ceiling and a long-term potential, but Phillip Rivers probably had the higher floor. Wentz is a huge unknown, but what does your gut say? If you were to run the 2021 Colt simulation 1,000 times with each, who has the better season more often? I understand the long-term ramifications, but is this an upgrade for 2021?
I like this, Chase. Yeah, and I agree with a lot of what he's saying here. So I think if you ran 1,000 simulations, you'd get more consistency with Rivers. You get more variance with Wentz, but you'd get a higher peak variance with Wentz. And that probably sounds like super math averagey stuff, but basically if you run 1,000 simulations, I think you get more 12, 13 win seasons with Wentz. Not many, obviously, but like now you'd also get some 7 and 8 winners I think with the Rivers, it'd be more of like, whatever, 8 to 11, something like that. You're definitely going to play a harder schedule than you did last season. But, if Frank Reich can find all the pieces of the puzzle and put them back, boy, the opportunity's there to flourish. And I think flourish pretty quickly. But if you can't find the pieces, it'd be like doing a puzzle with your 2 or 3 year old.
This one comes from Matt. Says Chris Ballard has stated that the Colts are just now entering into their championship window. How do you think he will go about adding to the roster as he tries to get them over the hump? Former Colts GM Bill Polian used to say that he would rather overpay his own free agents than pay someone else's because he at least knew what he was getting with his own. He would also use the draft to add players. Do you see Chris Ballard continuing to use the draft and re-signing his own free agents? Or can you see him bringing in outside free agents, building through the draft to get the Colts where we all hope they can go?
Well, you have to continue to draft well. And I know that sounds just so elementary, but, you have to. I think we'll start to see a few more splashes, Chris. But it's hard to really project the future until that QB's locked in. Is Wentz 2 years or is Wentz 4 years? Is Wentz 8 years or is he 2 years? That's the kind of the unknown in it, Matt. But he's going to be a homegrown and build and re-sign those guys, but there's going to be a couple more splashes, and you got to factor in the cap situation is going to continue to be something you have to take note of. So with that, draft well. As simple as that sounds and as hard as that is to achieve.
Kevin Jake asked, if you had to build a defense of Colts players since the year 2000, how many current players would make up your starting lineup?
Ooh.
DeForest Buckner, Darius Leonard, and Kenny Moore are locks for him. With how well Grover Stewart has played and the utter lack of defensive tackle play we had in franchise history, Stewart makes his list as well over Booger McFarland. Others that he could entertain adding would be Justin Blackmon and maybe Bobby Okereke. Thanks a lot and love the pod.
Yeah. Jake, it's a fascinating question. It's got me thinking. I don't know if I can go much further than the 3 you named. So he's got Buckner, Leonard, Moore.
Yes.
Well, your ends are Freeney Mathis. Your safeties are Bob Sanders, Antoine Bethea. I'm sorry, Julian Blackmon had a really nice rookie season, but anyone put him over Bob Sanders, Antoine Bethea, and they probably need to stop consuming beverages. Your corners, okay, I got Kenny Moore as one of them. If healthy, Marlon Jackson. I don't know, maybe one play stands out too much, but
Marlon was great early on for sure.
Yeah. I guess who are your linebackers? Brackett?
Yeah.
I think Jarrell Freeman. I know people want to forget those years.
If him and Leonard, imagine how many tackles are
right. So I'd say, I know they all don't maybe play the same positions, but I'll go with Gary Brackett, Jarrell Freeman, and Darius Leonard.
Okay.
Gary Brackett's kind of my Mike, and then I guess Freeman and Leonard are a little bit more. Leonard can do whatever he wants, and then Freeman had a really nice run here.
Yeah, he did.
I know he got popped up in Chicago, but yeah, Okereke, I guess, will be my first man off the bench. Booger, forgot about Booger. Yeah, defensive tackle. Corey Simon, Booger. I don't know, maybe it is Grover. That's a good one, Jake. Thank you.
All right, 4 more. This one's from Rick. Do you think Frank Reich and his staff listens to your podcast or any other media? Because I can't help but question how they keep making the same mistakes. At least put your ear to the ground and they know what they were doing right or wrong. Thanks for the opportunity. Love the show and go Colts.
Boy, I can't tell if Rick is punking me with this question or not. If Frank Reich is listening to this pod, then we got issues. We got a lot of issues here. Talk about a waste of time. Can you imagine Frank Reich committing 2 hours during the season each week to the pod?
He loves football, Kevin, just like our listeners.
Yeah, I know, but his obligations and listening to Kevin Bowen, boy, you don't want that high on the radar. Yeah, I'll just say this. Very important people in that building consume my content and my colleagues' content, without a doubt, mainly written. I'll say that. Certainly some people have been known to flip on a radio dial or two and listen maybe a little bit more in and out of work, but by no means is, Kevin's Corner or, whatever, what Jim and Joel do and what Zach and Steven do. I don't think that they are necessarily consistent listeners. I don't know, maybe during the off season, but yes, I would say written content quite frequently, read a lot, and sometimes interjected with in terms of let's have a back and forth on that.
Right.
Nothing crazy, but yeah.
This one comes from Trep. Hey, Kevin, after watching the Buffalo game, this defense has definitely found its level to where it's supposed to be. The Colts secondary is worrisome. The Colts pass rush is not there also. Teams continue to pick on Rock, and he is yet to step up to the challenge. What is needed for the Colts to fix the pass defense? I feel like the secondary hasn't looked good since the first time they played Tennessee.
Yeah, secondary and the pass defense in general did kind of wilt down the stretch. I thought, first off, you played a lot better passing offenses. Edge presence is where I start.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in terms of the secondary, I want to see your corners win better early in the down. And I feel like at times, and I guess mainly I'm talking to Rock, but, you struggle early. Now you're panicking. And at the point of attack, moment of truth, here comes a flag. So, but again, I think your edge presence can mask a lot of things. I feel like similar to quarterback on offense, if you've got a great pass rush, it can cover up some weaknesses defensively.
Isaac wants to know, if you could get Phillip Rivers that played this year and have that level of play for 10-plus years, would you do it or elect to draft a quarterback?
No, I would draft. And I'm greedy. I want more. And I want mobile. I know that Phillip, unbelievable career, probably going to be in Canton, and some people will be like, that's foolish, but I saw Phillip Rivers' career for 10 years play out, and it was damn good, and several playoff appearances, several wins in the playoffs as well, but I'm in the business to win championships. Plural, singular first, and then plural, and to do that, I want more, and like I said, mobile.
All right, the last question for this podcast comes from Brian. KB, you talk a lot about quarterback purgatory and how awful that is for a franchise, but what about pass rush purgatory? Basically, NFL teams don't let top-notch pass rush talent walk into free agency, so that means it has to be drafted. However, drafting in the mid to late round makes it tough to draft guys like Myles Garrett. If the Colts are good but not great with Phillip Rivers and a premier pass rush could push them over the top, how do we acquire it? Seems paradoxical to me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of validity to what Brian just said. Now, I do think you can find pass rush elsewhere. Obviously, Myles Garrett, number 1 overall pick. But, think about these past couple drafts. Two guys that we really talked about a whole lot on podcasts have had really nice starts to their career. Brian Burns in Carolina, I think, has been really close to double-digit sack seasons early on. Montez Sweat in Washington as well has been a really productive rusher. Those were, mid to late first rounders?
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the easiest way to achieve it is through the draft. But look at Tampa. Shaq Barrett, not drafted by them. Hell, I think he was maybe even undrafted. Sue, free agent, and JPP, Jason Pierre-Paul.
Yep.
So you can manufacture it in other ways. It's more difficult, of course, to do that, but I don't want to act like you can't ignore that. So, but pass rush purgatory, I would say, really ever since Mathis had the 19.5 sacks, you've been in edge rush purgatory. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, Brian.
All right, that wraps up Twitter questions. You want to let our listeners know any articles that you're working on or things coming up for you?
Yes, I appreciate you mentioning that. We got a lot of Carson Wentz content up on the site. I'm going to post something, basically 10 questions about Wentz and the situation here, just surrounding, and good and bad questions, surrounding his situation in the Colts here in the next day or so. Got free agent watches continue this week. Al-Qadim Muhammad, Danico Autry, Anthony Walker, I think TJ Carey. We'll round out the week there, and then we'll get into another mock draft look. I'm going to have that posted a little bit later in the week as well. So
love it. Love the mock drafts.
Oh, yeah, baby. Hey, we're, 2 months? 2 months
yeah,
and change?
Up,
yeah. And now, there's some finality, at least, to quarterback right now. So a little bit more definition, I guess, to what the Colts could and will do with still having a first-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
All right, he's Chris Presley. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great week, great weekend as well. We'll be back next week on Kevin's Corner.